mic goes silent 14 seconds before, you've got no help from your coordinator, suddenly you're thinking, is it on the wristband? Can I remember the call? Is everyone lined up properly? And that's a lot of pressure for anyone who hasn't played that many games in the NFL, because most of these guys are going to college, playing 1 or 2 years, and then they're going straight out to the NFL. So you might have only had 4 full seasons of football if you include high school, and then suddenly you're trying to go up against either a Brian Flores defense or a Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and they're disguising coverages, rolling things to you that you've not seen before. And on top of that, you have all of the pressure of executing the play as well as getting people lined up properly. So I think that time to develop. I think Sam Darnold has had his apprenticeship. He had a tough time with the Jets, 3rd overall pick in 2018, but he's a 7-year vet now. He's just come off of a great season backing up in San Francisco, learning from Kyle Shanahan, and you can really see that confidence translated to the field at the moment.
He talks a huge amount about that over the recent weeks, about that year he spent as a true backup in San Francisco. Not like in Carolina, where you know that if Baker Mayfield comes in and doesn't play well, you're going to be coming in and starting, so you've got to treat it that way. But actually going into a building which is professional, well coached, with real pros on both sides of the ball, learning just how to deal without pressure. And there was a brilliant article in The Athletic this week, a Jordan Rodriguez piece about Kevin O'Connell's coaching style, right? He comes from that same tree, was with McVay in the year that they went to and won the Super Bowl with Matt Stafford. And there's some brilliant examples of in that Super Bowl, as Odell Beckham went down and other players went down, how they managed to simplify everything to make it so quarterback friendly that as they had to roll with the punches, as things went wrong left, right and centre, Sean McVay had just made it so that everything was on his shoulders as the coach, and the quarterback just had it very, very easy. And what you've seen is his work with Sam Darnold this year is he's just taken every bit of pressure off Darnold. He's made all of the reads very easy. He's made all of the scheme and system very simple to pick up. Darnold's having to execute, and he's made some incredible throws. You forgot what a live arm he had at USC. The 97-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson against the 49ers where the ball goes 55 yards in the air is unreal. But the most important thing for him has been that Kevin O'Connell has really taken him under his wing, really spent the time to learn the verbiage, build the offense around him, and that's only going to benefit J.J. McCarthy as well, that he's going to sit and learn behind that. They all know, all the Vikings know, including Sam Darnold, that this is J.J. McCarthy's team from 2025.
Right.
Any speculation that, do they try and get Darnold on another big contract? Darnold's playing to get a big payday somewhere else next year, and so it's a win-win situation for everyone, whilst also knowing that the Vikings are building for the future. It's kind of perfect.
It's a 1-year deal, of course, Darnold's on, and at the moment, 4 weeks in, he's going to get a very big payday next season. Now, the Jets have, I guess, flattered to deceive so far, right? Pretty more Jekyll and Hyde than my picks in the picks contest, Will, quite frankly. They were anemic week 1, so-so week 2. Then they were, admittedly, against the Pats, who we think are one of the weaker operations this season, but they were very slick, very poised week 3, and then absolutely terrible offensively against the Broncos last week. So, which is the real Jets, offensively speaking?
I think it is a tale of hit and miss. I think the connection that we've been praying to see between Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson hasn't happened. He's actually gone back to his tried and tested Alan Lazard, who he brought with him from Green Bay. So he's throwing to people he's comfortable with, that he knows he has that connection with. And you do wonder, it's still early in the season, but they've really got to get that Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson connection going, because there's nothing that's stretching the field. So defenses can kind of stack the box without fear of anything deep hurting them at all. So I think last year there was so much hype, so much expectation. Aaron was going to the New York Jets to send them to the AFC Championship and beyond, and then he got injured. So it was a big what if, it was a big unknown. And then we've come into this season, and you still don't really know what you're going to get on each week. Against the Patriots, he looked like Aaron Rodgers of old, moving around, could be even MVP caliber arm back. And he still has that arm talent, but his mobility definitely is something that you cannot rely on for a long stretch in this season. And the weather played a huge impact in terms of the operation. They had 5 false start penalties, and there were even questions about changing the cadence, which have quickly been dampened down in the building.
The
that's
PR
for sure.
guys shut that one down very, very quickly. We'll get into that in a bit, because there are so many fascinating points you raise about Rodgers' predilection for his favourites. Rodgers at this stage of his career as well, and we all know what a talented player he is, but everything else you get with Aaron Rodgers too. So I really want to drill down into that. But looking around the stadium as it's filling up, and we are less than 50 minutes away from kickoff here at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, let's start to get a feel of the game from some of the key protagonists. Both teams landed earlier this week, and we, of course, dispatched Will Barney to catch up with as many of today's stars as he could. Let's kick things off with his chat with Jets rookie running back, Braylon Allen.
Right, I'm going to go to the loo now.
All right, mate.
You guys can hold between you. Oh, it looks great.
Oh, great.
Oh, where's the link?
It's the talkSPORT Endzone YouTube.
talkSPORT Endzone YouTube. Great. How are the interviews with Lewis Rees-Zammit?
Huh?
How were the interviews with Lewis Rees-Zammit?
Yeah, he's very media. He's very he's not giving a huge amount away, but I think he's also quite realistic, which is a good thing. And actually, his biggest problem by a country mile in Kansas City, and he owns up to this, is pass pro. It's
awful. It's horrible for everyone.
Yeah,
especially running back.
And the Chiefs want a running back. They decided they want to play him. The Jags have brought him in and gone, oh yeah, you can be a wide receiver.
Braylon Allen there, the Jets rookie, who I'm reliably informed is in current possession of a fantastic record. He's the youngest player to ever score a touchdown in the NFL. He's under 21, Christian, which is terrifying. It just makes me feel old when I hear stats like that. Reminder, of course, that talkSPORT now has its very own dedicated YouTube channel. talkSPORT Endzone. There is loads of content, including interviews like that with Braylon Allen, other big interviews from this week and all through the season. In fact, Christian, we are live right now.
It feels good. It feels strange being on camera and on the radio waves, but it's nice. I'm adjusting to it well.
You are handling it very well. Speaking of adjusting, let's talk about how the Jets try and adjust this offense to something a little bit more contending, because that's really their expectations coming into this season. Obviously, last year was a write-off with Rodgers going down in the very first game of the season. But this year, given their D, and more of them in a minute, people were looking at them thinking the East is maybe more open than before, and it's proved to be the case with the Dolphins because of injury and other factors not at the races. The Patriots are in development. They started this season thinking we should be making the playoffs, we could have a deep run, but the offense isn't coming to the party yet. Why not?
There's been so much potential, so much promise, but it's just not clicking. There's been a lot of miscues. I think Aaron Rodgers is someone who relies on trust, especially with his receivers. He's gone from Green Bay having Devontae Adams as his safety net, and even with Aaron Jones as well in the backfield. So he's gone with people he's had for years. And And the problem is, yes, he missed all of last season, and potentially because not many reps in the preseason, they're still finding their rhythm with 12 under center and those offensive weapons that we know they have. But the problem is that trust isn't there yet with him and Garrett Wilson. And when Garrett Wilson is your danger weapon that everyone's been expecting to really blow this year, and he's not really come up with much of a significant contribution compared to people like Alan Lazard. Even Conklin is making more of a contribution on offense. That's problematic. So the key to this offense is being able to get that connection between Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers going.
It is interesting to hear that, because as you rightly say, Garrett Wilson isn't a rookie that is finding his feet. You think about the last year of Rodgers in Green Bay, and that was, as things got more and more dysfunctional, that was the problem. You know, there were a lot of eyebrow raises, eye rolling, but you had a very young receiving core. Incidentally, a group that is now lights out with Jordan Love, but you kind of get it. They were raw. You could almost understand the frustration, understand why you didn't trust him. Critics would say, well, as the vet, you should be bringing him up with you, but we'll put that to one side. But with Garrett Wilson, he's a bona fide number one. He's one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL right now. So why doesn't Rodgers trust him?
I think that's just reps. I think it's also being able to break that seal on you're playing with a Hall of Fame quarterback, and the expectations and the standards are that much higher. So he's looking for cues that are instinctive, and he'll look at you to see if you're going to win from almost a line of scrimmage, and then he'll move off of that progression and go to someone he knows is going to be open because he's played with them more often. So I think there's that expectation. I mean, Baker Mayfield spoke about it with Tom Brady, how everyone was quite stressed in the building.
Yeah,
and when
that went well for Baker.
Yeah, that went really well, especially when he was calling that game for him afterwards. But I guess championships speak a bit differently. But with this situation, Aaron Rodgers has come to this franchise which is very dysfunctional, and there was all this hope, all this optimism that was thrown away in the first game last season. And I think that expectation is still lingering on this team, but especially with someone like Garrett Wilson, who was drafted very highly, has played well, and the excuse has always been, what's his service like? Who's throwing him the ball? That's the reason for the lack of production. And that's not an excuse that they can rely on anymore this season.
Absolutely not. I wonder if today is the breakout day this season anyway for the Rodgers-Wilson connection. I'm looking across the field, and the players are going through their paces, warming up. We're 40 minutes and change away from kickoff. Vikings-Jets, more build-up coming your way next.
So, guys, during the breaks, for anyone who is watching on the talkSPORT Endzone YouTube channel, we are going to continue broadcasting on video. Now,
no breaks for us then.
No, basically, and this is a bit behind the scenes. There's about 6 people watching at the moment who've only just tweeted it, so it's fine. If you are watching, please subscribe to the channel and comment below, and we'll read through some of the comments as we're going through the game. We can take a break. We'll just give them a bit of atmosphere. They can hear what's going on in the stadium,
and they get to see the real us. They get to see the real us.
What do you mean? I never put on any kind of.
Not at all. I have a large pack of fruit pastels to my side that I'll be stuffing my face with throughout the game. That's what I mean, the real us.
Pull the curtain, top athletes. Absolutely scoffing the pastels. We've got to be quite careful, that is what Will Gavin said.
Yeah, I've already sworn on the live stream, I think, but don't worry about it. Not one of the category A swear words, just a lower end one.
I think my very first show on talkSPORT 2, the very first commercial break, the mics were still hot, and I think I swore across the nation on my very first shot. So it's been downhill from there, quite frankly. Hey, speaking of painting the picture in the colour a little bit in the stadium, I mean, looking around, I referenced it a bit at the top. It feels very much it is going to be a heavily Vikings crowd.
Yeah, home game. Especially when I think that it was similar. The Saints travelled well 2 years ago. Vikings Saints, they did travel well, but I think the purple's so distinctive, especially with it being painted in the end zone. There's lots of jerseys in the streets. Even walking in, you saw the Jets fans were certainly outnumbered. There's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of good reason to be in London if you're a Vikings fan right now, hopefully leaving with 5-0.
Yeah, it definitely...
I'm not casting any aspersions on any of the people involved at all. But there were a lot of Jets fans still back in the boozers and back in McDonald's. As I got here on Liverpool Street at about 11:30 this morning, there were still a lot of them there. The Vikings fans had made their way to the stadium early. Yeah. So I think maybe we'll see more of a balance as we get into it. Vikings fans, if you look down towards the bottom ends of the stands, and the Vikings fans have just made their way out here. The Vikings players have just made their way out here, getting a bit of noise from the crowd as well. But if you look down in the lower reaches, along the barriers, it's all purple along there, all purple, as people are just filling down, trying to see the superstars, get a glimpse of Justin Jefferson. Harrison Phillips, we're going to hear from in a little while in the middle of the field there as they get started with their warm-ups. I love watching this bit as well. It's the old watching to see the the longest field goal somebody's going to kick during practice, so we can reference it during the game.
Absolutely. Keep your eyes firmly peeled on that. We're going to keep our eyes peeled as well. We mentioned name dropping a bit earlier on. We've already seen one or two big name celebs in the house, so we'll drop a few of those as they appear. Of course, they're going to be on the screen, and to the most part, we'll be getting, I'm sure, a rapturous welcome from the fans here in London. Welcome back to live coverage of Jets Vikings from Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, the first of 3 NFL games in London this season. All 3 of them, of course, will be live right here on talkSPORT 2. Let's get the inevitable question out of the way, Christian. And don't worry, I'm not going to talk about London franchise or anything like that, but more about the trip and the way that teams have adapted over the years when they land, when they come in. Latterly, of course, the preference has been to make it as late in the week, as late in the day as possible. To the most part, how much is the London factor a leveler here? In the sense that, as we've established, the Vikings in red-hot form, the Jets a little bit indifferent. How much does the international factor into that?
It makes it almost a neutral venue, even though it's a home game for the Vikings. You know that Minnesota would be absolutely raucous with a 4-0 team at home. They'd be celebrating it. So being able to have almost a neutral venue for the Jets is a huge advantage, because both teams have had to travel. Both teams have had to get a journey out of their legs and out of their minds and adjust to a timing and time zone difference. And we've seen some great equalizers in terms of the results. When you come into London, form almost goes out the window, and it's any given Sunday. It's that London pressure where it's just a different dynamic, and you sometimes see upsets that you wouldn't have imagined if it was on home soil.
Surprising results. So you mentioned the Ravens, who were so slow coming out of the gates in that game. Will, do you think there's more pressure on the Vikings or the Jets today? Because if Minnesota go to 5-0, we've got to move on from the narrative of, really surprising good start to the season, to these guys are serious contenders for a deep run in the playoffs, possibly the Super Bowl. The Jets, they're at 2-2 at the moment. They've got the Bills, the Steelers, and the Texans coming up over the next month. So there's a lot riding on today, going home with a winning record. Who's more pressure on?
I think you've absolutely nailed it. The pressure is on the New York Jets. It's on Bobby Saleh. It's on Aaron Rodgers, particularly after that performance against the Broncos last week, right? Now, they come off the back of that Patriots performance where offensively they really clicked, where Rodgers looked, I thought, the best that he's looked, certainly since the injury. I probably suggested this last season in Green Bay as well. We never saw a performance quite as strong as that one. To come off and have such a poor week overall, where Rodgers is throwing the ball 42 times, where they can't get the run game going, where the Broncos just have them totally figured out. If they have 3-1 here and they've got that schedule in front of them, I'm not saying it's pressure off. I'm saying they could lose here and still be well in with that kind of playoff run. From my perspective, I look at if they lose today and I look at that run of games coming up, suddenly the Jets, it becomes very, very difficult. Just 5 weeks into the season with a bye week on the horizon, they suddenly starting to go on some big, big winning runs. And I don't know, what I've seen from them this season, they look like they're going to be, as you said earlier, Jekyll and Hyde. And when you're Jekyll and Hyde, you don't want to slip too far behind 500 because you tend to stay there.
With the Vikings, we talked about their record and how they've been rolling, but not particularly accentuated how impressive most of those wins have been. And even last week against the Packers, where they absolutely demolished them in the first half, and there was the second half comeback. And when we look at the Vikings D, we'll analyse a little bit more how the Packers did that and what the Jets might look and borrow from that playbook. But it's not just their 4-0. They're doing it in style, with swagger. They're dominating most of the time.
I think that's the key word, dominating. We've seen Sam Darnold come out and set the league on fire, and I think it's caught a lot of people off guard. It's a well-coached team on both sides of the ball, so Sam Darnold can play free because he knows his defense is going to be able to create stops, create turnovers, get him the ball back, and so that puts you in a different position where you know, yes, I can go out and win the game, but sometimes I can just play the sensible pass and play the right option, knowing that my defense is there to bail me out if it doesn't complete. So I think there's a huge confidence from that complementary football with all 3 phases of the game delivering on a high level.
Yeah. The huge pressure today, we mentioned Rodgers, but him and Nathaniel Hackett putting together a game plan against the best defense in the NFL through the first 4 weeks of the season. Brian Flores has this team absolutely humming right now, and they're not quite a no-name defense, but they're getting Ivan Pace back today. They are looking like they're not one of these teams when, if you look at like when they faced the 49ers back in week 3, people were talking about the 49ers defense has all pros at all 3 levels. That's not something you would say about this side, but they just have the right players in the right fits in the right locations, and most importantly, you compare what they did last season to this season, you feel like Brian Flores finally fully has trust in the members of that unit to allow someone like Josh Metellus, who's been an absolute superstar, to completely just play any position on the field. You see him at strong safety, free safety, you see him lining up on the line of scrimmage, you see him disguising blitzes, actually crashing blitzes. Like, you see, like, he just has such trust in those matchups and such belief in what they're doing that just feeds into that defense, and they're going to come out here full of swagger. So if Rodgers and Hackett don't score on the first 2 drives, don't win first down early, and find themselves getting behind, this game becomes a blowout pretty sharpish. I'm hoping that's not the case, but I could definitely imagine it happening.
Could be a long afternoon. Well, this Vikings D, number 1 in the NFL in DVOA, which is the metric I think most people look at above any other. But here's the kicker. Almost double that of the second best defense, New Orleans. That is how good this D is performing right now. And one of the key protagonists in that Minnesota defense, Harrison Phillips, caught up a little bit earlier on this week with talkSPORT's Will Varney.
All right, for those guys who are watching on the stream at home, and we see there are a few of you in, a few comments coming in. Lucas Milburn, loving the dancing. Sorry, I kind of can't help myself. I'm full of energy. Just me, basically just me. And Kaijumi Kaiju says, go Vikings. The interviews are being played from back at base, and so you're not hearing them on the live stream. When it comes to the game itself, they'll hear every single moment, every interview we do here, everything else. You're going to have these little 2-minute, 3-minute breaks where we're going to chat amongst ourselves, where we'll come back from the interviews and we'll be discussing. So don't go anywhere, stay tuned in, throw in the comments, chat amongst yourselves, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Harrison Phillips there, catching up with talkSPORT's Will Varney at Vikings practice. And speaking of things, warming up in the stadium, both teams in their respective end zones, getting themselves set, because we are now 30 minutes away from kickoff, the first of 3 live games in London, live on the talkSPORT network. The NFL season is up and running, and the NFL is well and truly here. We'll be back in a few with more build-up.
Oh, we're still live. There we go. I've got to look over at Will every time just to make sure if we are or not.
Very wise to do that.
It's worth mentioning we are live on talkSPORT 2 as well, where you can also hear it. And all those interviews. If you enjoyed the 3 minutes you heard there,
why wouldn't you?
You can see the whole thing on talkSPORT's dedicated NFL YouTube page, talkSPORT Endzone.
The key is, firstly, a couple of things. CSW, what's the over-under on how many times we are going to be plugging this all for you. I'm going to go 27. Okay.
I reckon I can double the subs today.
We can
like and subscribe, guys. Like and subscribe.
Have you subscribed? I'm on it. We're on it. Yeah, subscribe. Yeah, that's the key with YouTube, though. You won't miss a trick, right? And it's not just the interviews for all the London games that are being put out. It's all through the season as well. So go get involved with that. We got our dancing moving a little bit then, I felt for that last try. I noticed you were moving a little bit.
Some Kendrick ringing out. They're not like us. That is going to go off in New Orleans in February.
How excited are we about that? Because it's going to be Kendrick and friends, right?
Yeah, definitely. But also, the Lil Wayne snub. New Orleans native.
Yeah, Lil Wayne's definitely turning up.
The performance value, I think, one song. It's got to come out for one song.
Yeah,
surely.
right.
It's got to come out for one song.
What's really funny about it is, like, we were at the Los Angeles Super Bowl when it was that unbelievable, like, legendary hip-hop lineup.
Top three
with Dre,
halftime show,
Eminem, Mary J. Blige, 50 Cent, Snoop Dogg.
Anderson .Paak was just on the drums.
Ridiculous. And look, we were talking about this in the office the other day. One of the kind of staff who's, like, not a big NFL fan but was asking about favourite halftime shows. And she went, yeah, that halftime show was one of the best, but you know what? It got ruined for me by Kendrick Lamar turning up. And I was like, I thought that was the best bit.
That's probably the only person in the world with that view, I think.
So I think that's the problem is, like, you need to feed into the nostalgia hardcore. I think Usher really missed a beat last year by playing way too much stuff from the last decade and nowhere near enough stuff off those first two albums, which was going to have everyone going. Like, he didn't play You Remind Me. He didn't play, that's the stuff that was really going to let the crowd into it, right?
That's the key. I mean, it's true, I guess, with certain sets at big festivals or Liam Gallagher at the AJ Dubois fight. Yeah. I was thinking... They're thinking, okay, is he going to drop at least one of his new...
Yeah,
no, he's got classic,
you got to go fan favourites, really.
Fan favourites.
Although Rihanna went a bit differently. No guests.
Yeah.
A bit of a surprise. No guests, just her solo act.
But just her pregnant on a floating platform about 50 feet in the air.
No health and safety hazards there at all.
Very few artists can pull off just doing, I think, a show these days on their own. But definitely, I think Kendrick could do that, but I'm sure we'll be wheeling out some of his pals for the Super Bowl halftime show. That game, and indeed the halftime show, will be live on the talkSPORT network. The Jets are back in the locker room pretty much, with one or two exceptions. At least they're heading there. They're getting their orders. The Vikings, on the other hand, huddled up on the field, and getting ready for game time.
Josh Metellus, who we talked a little bit about in the earlier section, of one of the real stars of that defense. Absolute superstar, breaking the team down, getting them hyped up. He's now bouncing his way down the sideline, getting the crowd going as well. Like, they know this is a home game. When they've got that home game vibes, it's going to get loud in here.
Welcome back to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Nat Coombs, your host, alongside Will Gavin and Christian Scotland Williamson. We have got all the coverage right here of Jets Vikings, every single down, every single key moment coming your way. And the kickoff is less than 30 minutes away, so it's time to get the latest odds with William Hill. Delighted to say Ben Barrett from William Hill joins us now. Afternoon, Ben. Thanks very much indeed. Ben, it's interesting when you hear that total, Christian. 42, relatively low and logical because there are two very good defenses on show this afternoon. Let's talk a bit more about this Vikings D and how the Jets offense might try and combat it. We talked before about Brian Flores, their defensive coordinator, such an integral part, of course, of this Vikings success. And the rehabilitation for Sam Darnold, I guess you can apply that to Brian Flores as well. He had a difficult exit from Miami. It was Mike Tomlin, your old coach, of course, who threw him a lifeline when a lot of people in the NFL were snubbing him, brought him into the Steelers coaching staff, and that he landed here as the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. Talk us through the impact he's had on this Vikings D and why he's so highly regarded as a coordinator.
Well, as another head coach in the building, I think first and foremost, he's had success. You mentioned that it was my great coach, Mike Tomlin, who picked him up from the wilderness, effectively, where a lot of people weren't really willing to engage with him, especially given what was going on. But you have to wonder that experience of working with that Steelers defense, which is also flying at the moment. So two incredible defenses. Brian Flores has now come to the Vikings. This offseason picked up seven or eight really valuable players on the defensive side who are high IQ players, and they've not got the star-studded, stacked roster on the defense that you'd expect, but they kind of work almost like an amoeba, where they form and they morph and they can do multiple different things, where you've got Van Ginkel dropping off the defensive line, picking off balls, and they're able to play multiple positions. And I think that's the core of what this team tries to do, both on offense and defense. Play fast, play aggressive, but with absolute clarity and with high IQ players that can know their assignment, know their roles, and disguise things and make things incredibly difficult for the opposition offense. And that's where they're going up against Aaron Rodgers, who's pretty much seen it all. He's one of the best in terms of pre-snap cadence. It may have been an issue before, but you'd expect international soil. They may be able to use a hard count, and so it will be the Vikings to stay disciplined and really attack this Jets offense, because Aaron Rodgers can do it all, but they can't throw it deep down the field at the moment.
It's really interesting, Will, isn't it? When you think about the, as Christian said, the savvy that Aaron Rodgers has, not just because of the length of the game that he's played at the highest level. He was always that kind of player, right? He's one of these guys that is renowned for being incredibly fast at working stuff out. But Brian Flores allows his defensive players to make some of their own judgments and calls as well. So that battle in the moment is going to be fascinating to watch.
It's one of those defenses which is incredibly simple in its very base, right? Is you are going to show blitz almost constantly, and then you're either going to drop into a zone coverage or you're going to actually come and blitz. They basically just do those two things. The problem is if the quarterback doesn't know which of those two things you're going to do, how do you react and behave around that? That's kind of the crux of what they've managed to achieve. There are areas in which this defense can be picked on, and I think we've got this idea that because they've been so brilliant through 4 weeks, that they are unbeatable. I think if you run the ball very well, and we did see like the 49ers went like 5.5 yards a clip against them in week 3. If you run the ball well, if you win on those early downs, so you force them so they can't be blitzing constantly, and the kind of really key thing for me is if you utilise that middle of the field. Because as this defence has developed, as he has decided that he trusts guys more one-on-one, they've been playing a whole bunch more quarters coverage on the back end, which is where basically your 4 defensive backs are each given a portion of the field, and that's what you deal with. That leaves holes in the zone, and if you've got a quarterback who can read a defense really well and can get the ball out very quickly, like Aaron Rodgers does, in under 3 seconds on average, actually the Jets could get this moving if they're clever. I'm just slightly worried that with the play caller involved and with a quarterback who likes to freelance a little bit, they're not going to be that clever about it. If they scripted this well, they've got a chance of putting this Vikings team down early, and then suddenly they can't do all of those really exciting things that they do.
I think they struggle to play man-to-man. And the problem is the Jets don't really have the personnel to beat them and make them match up man-to-man. So like you said, the middle of the field is usually open. They bring 8-9 guys down on the defensive line, which means those mugged backers have 15 yards to get back into their spot drops. And that's where you can really exploit it, especially with someone like Aaron Rodgers. But the key will be, can Aaron Rodgers get his personnel around him to see the same things that he sees?
Right, sure. Just on the Packers game last week, because we referenced it a little bit earlier, the second half of the Packers comeback, having been dead and buried, it looked like a very different Vikings defense. And when you scratch beneath the surface, one of the things that was pulled out was how Green Bay used no huddle. So before that game, weeks 1 to 3, 5 no huddle. In the game against the Vikings, many of which, of course, coming in the second half, 19 times they used that. And you juxtapose that with an issue that Kevin Seifert from ESPN made this week, the age of this Vikings team. And that's an obvious advantage because they've been around the block. But at the same time, that's potentially going to be a problem if they're kept on the back foot.
And the thing is here, we're getting quite X's and O's with this, right? From a pure storyline perspective, all this week has been like Sam Darnold going against his former team. Sam Darnold going against his former team. He was mistreated in New York. He never got the opportunities. Now he's come back. He's a different man. All that focus has been on that side. There's a huge kind of ignorance I've heard in the media this week to the fact that Aaron Rodgers owned this Vikings team for 15 years while he was in Green Bay.
Sure.
And the Vikings fans still to this day absolutely despise Aaron Rodgers. and look, on that very point, if they can get a win against the Packers in week 4 and then come here and beat Aaron Rodgers in week 5, they don't care if they go 5-12 for the season. They're going to be on such a high from all of that. Yeah. And I do think that's going to play slightly into this. For some of those players who were there, for the fans in this crowd, for Rodgers himself, there is a little bit of an understanding. And Flores' defence is smarter than Zimmer's, but that doesn't mean it's not very pressure heavy and doesn't do a lot of things which do actually, in theory, play into Rodgers' hands.
You mentioned about we talked the Garrett Wilson situation, and he perhaps doesn't have, or at least have the connection, even if he has the weapons to exploit the advantages they theoretically have. Devontae Adams, let's get into that. Devontae Adams, one of the best receivers in the game, and of course, got a connection or two with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of buzz about where he's going to land, because he's definitely leaving Las Vegas. What do you think? Is he going to be a Jet?
I think it's almost like stepbrothers where they miss each other. They can't do anything without each other.
Haven't you noticed that as well? Because the two teams they talked about were the Jets and the Saints.
Exactly.
They're that desperate to link back
I need
with
to play
Derek
my
Carr.
friends. My friends.
Oh my God, friends! It's like, come on, Devontae. Go to a team that's actually got a chance of winning a Super Bowl.
But the thing is, it does play into it though, because if he's trying to pad his stats for the Hall of Fame, receiving yard championships matter. Firstly, receiving yards matter. So if he thinks that he probably still has another 3 or 4 years to go, he could take a gamble and think, okay, if Aaron Rodgers only has another year, maybe 2, I want to see him out and play well with him, knowing that he needs a go-to guy on this Jets offense. So that is a realistic candidate to be a top trade landing spot for him.
Okay, well, let's hear from, potentially, theoretically, one of Devontae Adams' soon-to-be teammates, Mike Williams. He caught up with Will Varney at camp a bit earlier.
How long on this one?